Hello, I'm Richard Tassoff. I'm an immigration attorney, and today I'm going to tell you about the adjustment of status interview for married couples. Now, the first thing I want to say is that this is just general information. Read the disclaimer below. So, this interview is to see if the two of you are really married and living together. And second, if the foreigner is eligible to get resident status. Those are two different questions. So let's take the first one. First one is whether or not you're married and living together. That will be determined by the immigration officer based on documents that you bring and answers to questions that will be asked. The second part of the interview is whether or not the foreigner is eligible. That may have to do with how they entered the country, have they had any problems with the police, whether or not they're a terrorist, do they practice polygamy. There's all sorts of questions. And those questions are actually on the form that was prepared and submitted to get the application to get the appointment for the adjustment interview. So it is probably really smart to go over those forms even before you leave to the immigration office. Once you get to the office, you'll go through security and you will take your appointment letter and hand it to someone that is inside the office. That person will more likely than not ask you for identification to make sure that you are who you say you are and that everyone who has to be at the interview has arrived. You will then be called by an immigration officer. The immigration officer may call you after a few minutes or maybe an hour. It just depends how busy that office is. When you go in with the immigration officer, you will likely be in a small office, and the officer will swear you and your spouse to tell the truth. Then you'll sit down, and there'll be questions. There'll be questions about your marriage. There'll be questions about whether or not the foreigner is qualified to get resident status. During the interview, there's a possibility that you and your spouse will be separated and questions asked of one of you. Then the officer will switch and ask the same questions again. Well, my advice is that you give honest answers, and if you don't remember, you say, "I don't remember," because it's far better to say that than to remember incorrectly. After the interview, your immigration officer will likely tell you what is happening on your case. They will say either that you've been approved, or that they have to review it, or that maybe their supervisor has to review it. These are all legitimate answers to the question of, have I been approved? So you may walk out knowing that you've been approved, or you may walk out thinking, I don't know, but that officer will send you something in the mail letting you know what the decision was. There's also the possibility that you're handed a checklist of additional documents that you need to submit to complete the application. So in those cases, it is very important that you get the documents as directed and submit them to the immigration office through whatever way they prefer. Most of the time it's by mail. And then you'll wait for a period of weeks, maybe even months, to get an answer from the immigration service. That is the general way an interview proceeds. Now, There's a lot of variations depending on how the immigration officer wants to conduct the interview. But in general, that's what's going to happen. Remember, I'm Richard Tassoff. My address is below. Have a good day.